It was in Napa Valley. And I went and I was like, oh my God, there's so much actually we don't know. But if we develop the right technologies and ask the right questions and data mine nature better, we will find solutions to everything. It's just a matter of time.
Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Michael Wolf, and today's guest is Dr. Nora Khaldi, the founder and CEO of Nuritas, a company that uses AI to discover new ingredients that haven't been discovered in the world before. Trained as a mathematician and computer scientist, Dr. Khaldi talks about an early epiphany where she learned about how nature is essentially code and how it shaped her thinking about using tools like AI to help unlock new ingredients. We will have another podcast early next week, so stay tuned for that. But for now, let's get to my conversation with Dr. Nora Khaldi. All right. Tell us who you are and what you do.
My name is Dr. Nora Khaldi. I'm the founder and CEO of Nuritas. What we do at Nuritas is we use AI to discover peptides. Peptides are ingredients that can transform health benefits of products. So they improve product healthiness and sustainability of the product as well.
Welcome, Nora. It's great to have you. And we were just having a pre-conversation about the name Nuritas, and you gave a quick description about what it is. How would you tell people what that name means?
Yeah, at the beginnings, when I was founding Nuritas, a name
which is so like 2015, right? It's like 10 years ago.
2014, 2015. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I remember sitting down and saying, okay, there's three pillars that are very important. One of which is nutrition. The other one is nature. And the other one is truth and veritas. And it's combining all three together. So it came as Nuritas. So it's combining veritas with nutrition and nature. So the name is really kind of representing what we really do, using AI to really understand nature better and bring molecules that really improve human health to consumers.
And listeners can hear a hint, I think, of an Irish accent. But you are now in the U.S. in Connecticut, essentially for the last couple of years, establishing the U.S. presence.
No, Nuritas was born in Ireland, Dublin, and the first office we had was right in front of the Guinness Brewery, the Guinness Storehouse, a pretty historic area. Since then, our main office in Ireland is on Dawson Street, which is the city centre, very close to Trinity College. That's where all the laboratories, all the AI and engineering is there. And then I moved to the US about two and a half years ago to establish the US team and to grow the US market as we started to commercialize our products and our ingredients in general. Really happy to be here. I'm based in Connecticut at the moment.
We wrote about you guys in 2021. And at the time, you were pretty early talking about how you're an AI for peptides and protein development. Talk about how you guys have changed since that time. I think at the time we wrote about you guys, you just raised your Series B in the area of, I think, $45 to $50 million. And you just recently had some news where you raised some more money. But have you guys changed a lot in that time, or is it still the same basic mission?
It's a good question, Michael. So the vision has always been improving the lives of billions of people. That was, and it won't change. That was really the core driver for everyone at Nuritas, including myself, and the core driver to Nuritas's goals. Being in everyday products that consumers take, whether it's a food, whether it's a supplement, whether it's a cream, and having our ingredients fuel those products and making them healthier through our ingredients is really what we're set out to do. That was from day one, has not changed, it will not change. And really, the first part of Nuritas has been really to kind of, develop the technology itself, the AI technology, and prove it. So no one at that time, even today, no one has ever proven an AI technology in life science area all the way through. So from a concept all the way into clinical success onto the market. So we're the first to have taken an AI technology and develop it in such a way that it can actually discover biologically relevant ingredients that can really improve our health and well-being and prove them through clinicals and then regulatory and taking them to market. And today they're in various products in 6 continents and it's growing, and they're growing really fast. So that's really an interesting way. But at the beginning of the journey, like you mentioned, no one knew what AI was when I first started. I'm a mathematician, computer scientist myself, So I was always kind of in that field, but I came to that whole area of nutrition after my PhD. And I discovered that this area is like, it's an incredible area that's in need of improvement and especially from a health perspective. A lot of products are not created for healthiness, they're created for taste and pricing. And health is just a second thought. And this is why there's massive epidemics in terms of diabetes, cardiovascular issues, immune dysregulation. And so that's the coming in that area is like, why can't we create better ingredients that do not cause this? And today, ingredient discovery is impossible with the technologies of today. That's why there's no new ingredients. All the ingredients we use in the industry are very old. They're 100 years old. So the idea of bringing new technology like AI and other technologies that I integrated at the beginning of Nuritas to enable ingredient discovery again, not just about taste and cost, but also about health, was novel, and it still is. And also the whole peptide world, which is the modality or the type of ingredients we develop, were only and solely focused on peptides. It's because peptides are really interesting. They're the language of life. They're the way our bodies communicate. They're the major signaling molecule. They're messengers in the body and tell us what to do for everything we do, whether we're reading, eating, moving, etc. And combining those two is really kind of unique, still is. And I remember actually, Michael, just for the anecdote, I remember presenting Nuritas at the onset, and I was giving a talk, and I was talking about AI and peptides. And the conversation was like, we don't know what peptides are, but is AI artificial insemination? And I'm like, no.
Oh my gosh, seriously.
that was like 8 years. It wasn't like long ago. It was like 8 years ago.
So you were talking the story early. I do want to circle back. When you say no new ingredients have been discovered for the past century, it does seem like there's been a lot of ingredients. There's been food scientists and people in the big food world and the startup world discovering new building blocks for food. What do you mean when you say that everything's 100 years old?
Yeah. So to discover a new ingredient with a clinically backed claim, so discover scientifically proven ingredient takes decades. Okay, it literally just the way it is, because you're testing thousands and thousands of different ones in thousands and thousands of areas of potential application. So what you have usually is that ingredient suppliers today, the major ingredient companies behind the scene, cannot create any more ingredients with the technologies of today. So they reuse the old ingredients, they rebrand them, they produce them in more sustainable ways, they reduce the dose, they find new functionalities for them. But ultimately, we're talking about the same exact three-dimensional structures and type of ingredients that are behind the scene. Because again, creating a new ingredient takes decades, costs hundreds of millions, and very few of those can recoup the costs. So that's why it's actually impossible today to discover new ingredients. What happens is obviously randomly, sometimes in different universities, by chance would discover an interesting molecule that would be interesting in a certain consumer need. And then that's taken. But again, that takes decades to reach the market. So when I came into this area, it was like, how can we accelerate ingredient discovery, make it fast enough and cost effective enough to make it possible? And there was no way of doing it without actually introducing a new technology. In this case, it was AI, to go through the trillions of molecules in each few plants and find this very few that have a special activity and what that activity is. So you're not testing billions a day, you're testing the very few that have the highest likelihood of activity.
If you were to example, look at Impossible Foods and their plant-based team, which seemed like a pretty novel discovery at the time, Pat Brown's a real legit scientist behind that. What would you call that? Is that a repurposing of an existing
yes
building block?
So a lot of those would be repurposing of existing. So it's identifying things that already exist and finding a new purpose for them. Yes. So and it doesn't reduce on obviously the amount of activity that takes. It doesn't reduce on the efficacy or how great the science is. But ultimately, a lot of the ingredients of today have been really building blocks from the past. So, and because most of the ingredients we're using today are 170 years old at minimum, they haven't been invented for what consumers are looking for today. Obviously, 100 years ago and today are very, very different. And 100 years ago, the industry was driven towards cost effectiveness. So things had to be cheap. Things had to taste good because you want to repeat consumption. Things had to scale. So they had to be like easy to formulate, etc. So those are criteria that kind of have driven this industry to where it is today. Health wasn't part of the equation at all. But today, the trend of health has grown so much that a lot of the industry now is lagging behind because they're like, okay, there's all these trends, but we have the same ingredients we're kind of using that aren't addressing that. So there's a lot of kind of retrofitting. Well, this may work in this area, let's retrofit it. But they're not really centered around, these ingredients have not centered around consumer trends of today. So they're retrofitted. Someone may find that a certain fish oil has an anti-inflammatory effect. So maybe the immune modulation might be good. Have they been developed for that at the beginning? No, they haven't. So what Nuritas has allowed to do is really start with a consumer clear need, and all the trends that are occurring that are changing on not a daily basis, but on a yearly basis, and identify those trends and quickly address them by finding molecules that truly are designed around this, that are both cost effective because we want to improve the lives of billions and be in many products, that are taste neutral and easy to formulate, but also carry a health benefit that's specific to that consumer need.
When you look at some of the existing players in the space that have been, beating the drum around using AI to kind of create new recipes and new formulations, like maybe Notco with their Giuseppe, so they're using AI to essentially create new recipes, but what you're saying is they're not going to the molecule level, which you guys are doing to build entirely new,
we're creating new IP in terms of new IP that's like pharmaceutical IP. It's a 20-year type IP around molecules that are found in everyday foods and everyday plants that our bodies today can't access. There's a lot of interesting molecules in foods and plants, and not just plants, but in foods in general, that our bodies cannot access the full benefit of. What we're doing, and peptides is one of those major ones, because our body just breaks up the protein in different ways randomly, and you get the benefit of the nutrition part, which is the amino acid, but not the peptides messenger part. So what we're doing is identifying those via AI, associating them to a health benefit or a trend, and then making sure that we can actually make it. Not every peptide can be produced at scale. Some of them, we can find some really incredible peptides, but we can't actually reach them and produce them at scale. And many we can. So we focus on the ones that we can actually access. And then we prove them scientifically before we go into human clinicals and regulatory. And we're really focused on those molecules, how to produce them, etc., giving access to human health. We're not focused on the formulation part, although obviously these peptides need to be formulated. We're more focused on getting those claims that differentiate a product and allow the product to address a consumer trend, like better sleep, more improving how your body operates with protein, because there's a whole protein trend today, and the more protein, the better. But, you reach an age where the protein, you can pour protein on a cell. It's not going to, you consume it. So doubling, we created a peptide that doubles the effect of protein at no matter what age. So you get more out of your protein, double your energy, doubles your recovery, doubles your strength from the same amount of protein. That's Pepti Strong. Those are some that are clear trends, but no solution. Sleep has melatonin, but there's a lot of issues with melatonin. So we created a non-hormonal plant peptide that we integrated with wearables so that people can see and measure the difference that the peptide can give them. They have less stress because it's an anticortisol. And you can measure that through heart rate variability, through the wearable. You can literally see it. Better REM, better deep sleep, etc. And then many more to come. We have one for glucose management, so reducing the spike of sugar, again, integrated with the wearable, so you can actually literally see the difference with our ingredients and so forth.
So talk about where you sit in the value chain with regards to your solutions, Pepti Youth, Pepti Strong. Are these building blocks that you essentially are then working with CPG brands to build supplements for? Have you ever considered doing a direct-to-consumer product yourself? Where are you in terms of that value chain?
Yeah, we're B2B, Michael, and we're focused on that. So our goal, like I said, our mission is to improve the lives of billions. It's very hard to do so if we just focus on one brand. And it was a discussion, because we can obviously go off and do our own D2C. It really is about getting into as many important products and with as many good partners to access those billions of people and allow, in general, consumers to access our ingredients through the creams they put on, like Pepti, or others through the foods and some of our ingredients like Pepti Strong, sleep and vitamin and supplement, including medical food as well in hospitals. So that's the goal. And as such, we work with those large, medium-sized and fast-mover brands who want to make a difference, have the reach. And the goal is to allow them to differentiate their product and to get really clinically proven claims with a lot of scientific backing. And we're constantly adding to the science. So every ingredient we have, we won't just stop at 2 clinicals. We'll keep doing more and more clinicals. Every year we'll add more and more. So the science accumulates on every ingredient, and they get that benefit and that reach. Differentiation using those.
I think early on you're focused on plant-based peptides, and has that changed since 2021?
So, yeah, the technology is agnostic, Michael. We can look at any type of peptide, whether it's human, plant, animal, etc. The focus today in terms of the ingredients we have taken to market ourselves have been plant-based, simply because, again, of the trends, the ease of access, and what customers are looking for. We also have partnered. So we do a lot of these partnerships where we co-develop ingredients from scratch. And we do them with the very large companies. I think some of them are public, like Givaudan, BSF. Actually, we've launched an ingredient with BSF, the largest chemical company in the world. It's an anti-inflammatory, anti-dandruff ingredient. It's a lot of products today, and that comes from our original discovery, and they've then taken it to market. And they've done more clinicals, etc. Really interesting, and so forth. So we do partnership where we invent from scratch something together. And then we also do our own development from the beginning to the end and take it to market ourselves. So far in plants, but again, it's been agnostic from a technology perspective.
Let's talk about the AI magnifier platform. You guys are early on. You were giving a speech, you said 8 years ago. People completely misinterpreted what the word AI stands for. I don't think that would happen today. It's entered the broader consciousness because of things like ChatGPT. But you can certainly agree that AI has evolved very quickly over the past few years. And I'm talking a lot about kind of the foundation models with a lot of funding behind it. You guys are building a platform starting from quite a while ago. How has that platform evolved? And has your approach changed over the past couple of years?
It hasn't. We've evolved. We kept with the times. I think that's the main thing to say. So in order to develop an AI system that can understand human biology and create things that really transform human biology, it's not easy. The first thing, you can't buy the data off the shelf. So it's not like a ChatGPT where you can use data or even publications, etc. You have to actually create your own data, and you have to train it on that data. So just to think about the concept of something that you're going to give a human that is found in a plant-based, that you can patent, that is going to go through the digestive system, not break down, do its activity, and then get broken down. That the peptide or the molecule needs to, formulate easily. It needs to resist heat, because if you want to bake the product, it needs to resist baking. It needs to be water soluble if you want to go into drinks, etc. So there are so many aspects that are important that people don't think about. They always think about efficacy, but they don't think about all the other aspects that are important. In order to create something that has all these aspects, because commercial success means it needs to tick the box of all these different chemical aspects. You have to build an AI that understands all those aspects. And to do that, you have to build the data in each of those categories. So for example, digestion, we have to literally build our own digestive systems and understand what peptides get broken down versus what don't, which ones are stable in heat though, which ones are going to bind to this receptor in the body and modulate and reduce cortisol versus not. So we had to build that, and that's the time it took to build. It took quite a few years, so I had to get quite a few very patient investors, Michael, on board because it wasn't easy to say, okay, if this is going to work, it's going to be massive, but we still don't know. We still need to prove the tech and still make sure that an AI system can literally understand human biology. Even humans don't understand human biology, so an AI system is even harder, so mathematically challenging. So the first few years were not about creating revenue at all. It took a good 7 years to close to 8 years to literally just prove the platform. And by proving it means you need to create the data that's unique to you. You need to make sure the AI understands that data and
Real
starts
quickly, let me
actually.
ask, how were you building that data? Were you doing trials? Were you?
Yes, so we had,
Okay.
so we have laboratories. We had initially, Nuritas was built on, we were going to stay pure tech and we're going to outsource everything else. And very quickly I realized that wasn't possible because AI feeds off very high quality, always the same under the same conditions data, but you need to feed it very often, all the time. And doing it with external parties was too slow. And also between a lab and a different lab, the data was different and not under the same conditions. So we had to bring in our own laboratories. So we had our own scientists doing a lot of experiments, all the same, and everything's had to be also coded, so people don't know what they're actually testing, because you don't want human bias to get into it. Because sometimes someone would like a molecule more than another, and it works all of it, and that is actually a lot of the biases that you see in the publication and literature. So there was a lot of that in terms of the data we had to build is literally biological data, whether cellular data, animal data, human data, chemical data, gene expression data, digestion data, so chemical data. And so we did that for a few years to a point where the AI could actually understand and start going after new areas. So we went after, for example, like I said, muscle health and aging of the muscle, of the skeletal muscle, and how do you redesign or reduce the age of the skeletal muscle? How do you look at sleep and stress? How do you look at glucose modulation? What are the different pathways or targets we could go after? Skin aging, the same, and so forth. So, and then the technology is capable of finding, but not only finding, because it's easy, it's not easy, but once you find something, you have to actually be able to make it and scale it in a cost-effective way. People forget that part, but if you can't scale a product in a cost-effective way that makes commercial sense for your customer, they're not going to buy it, no matter how great it is. That part was essential to us. And that's the part I made a mistake with previous to Nuritas. I learned that the hard way, found some incredible molecules, but we couldn't make them. So
it was spending a lot of time, had your own lab to build and get your own data sets. You trained it, and eventually the model started to understand what to do with it. And then there's a third component of not only can it understand what to do with it, it needed to also understand what building blocks were scalable that you could commercialize.
Yes, commercialization of an ingredient is so important. So if something, it can be the best molecule in the world, but if you can't actually produce it at scale, it will fail. And that one is like if the peptide is embedded in a molecule, because the peptides are inside a protein, so sometimes they're hard to access. So you can't actually open the protein enough to access the peptide. And in that case, they're going to be hard to produce. And so we try and avoid those. We go after the ones that are more accessible. And this is the reason why our success rate so far has been about 80% inside human clinicals. So success rate in clinic is huge. This is unheard of. And the reason is simple. It's because we've eliminated many of the risks at the onset of the project before we go on to a big journey of spending. And that's why it's because of that integration of different parts at the onset of the project through AI, not possible through usual current technologies, because the current technologies are all sequential. You learn from the first step 1, you go into step 2, you go into step 3. In AI, you integrate all those. So it's multidimensional. You're thinking all at the same time. And that accelerates but also reduces the risk.
Certainly there's been pharma companies that have had billions of dollars investment that has started to leverage AI for some years now to try to discover building blocks that could go into, pharmaceutical treatments. So how would you differ from them? Because it is essentially a similar technology for a different application.
Yeah. So there's different ways of segmenting it. It depends how you look at it. Ultimately, there are so far very few successes. We've been the first to take it through a clinical success, through regulatory success onto the market multiple times, not just one. Now, obviously, there are differences between the nutrition area and the pharma. Usually the differences are, although we do 3 clinicals the same way, they do same type of clinicals. The differences have been is that we cannot modify our peptides. The peptides are whatever you find in nature. We can't modify them because the industry we're in, we can't do that. We have to work with what we have. And the goal of the AI is to optimize that, is to search for the best molecules that are going to be heat stable for baking and formulation ease, etc., ease of formulation. In pharma, you have the bandwidth of saying, well, I'm going to modify peptide or the small molecule as much as I need in order for it to stay in blood for whatever time period, so that the person will only need to take it once a week or once a month as opposed to every day. We can't do that. So it is an everyday thing for us. So you need to take the ingredient every day to have the benefit. So there are differences, but ultimately, we're focused on peptides. Most of the pharmaceutical world has been so far, and I think the peptide trend is growing significantly since Ozempic and others in that space as well. But ultimately, small molecules has been the goal in those areas. And so far, the success in that area of AI has been, I think, between phase 1 and phase 2 in terms of clinical. And there has been a lot of failures. And I'm thinking the reasons for that is that, unlike in our space where there's clarity in like costs and stability, it has to be heat stable. It has to. There's so many criteria it has to do to take it further. In pharma, they don't have as many restrictions, and maybe part of the failures they've had is that they've taken too many without having those stringent.
That's super interesting, because we've heard like Sam Altman and some of the others from the OpenAIs of the world talk about how they think, and maybe the folks from Anthropic talk about how they think AI could solve all these diseases. But if we're going to solve for a lot of these problems that they think they could solve for, based on what you've learned over the past decade, do you think you need to take the approach where you put these more real world restrictions on things like cost and applicability?
The more restrictions, yes. The more restrictions you have at the start, I think would enormously help what comes out at the end. But at the onset, because chemistry in pharma is so expensive. And if you make a mistake on whatever molecule you're taking forward, you've spent like 50 million in chemistry just to modify it and realize, oh, it's not what you can't scale it, or you can't. It won't be stable in this type of formulation. So the restriction in what formulation goes into. So I think, I think we had to build that at the onset, which has helped significantly. The models we use also, we're not like, we're using, depending on the area you go into, you realize that certain models are better than others at understanding those areas.
Certainly Google, for example, has been working on things like AlphaFold and protein folding. And if you look at the foundation models, they're starting to open up, or you can also certainly go to China and get some of the more open source models and essentially take that and build your own model on top of their engine. If we're going to talk about stacks, could you see taking some of your data and integrating with some of their AI computational models to accelerate even faster, or do you see your competitors possibly doing that?
AI is simply a tool, and I think that people need to think about it that way. It's simply a tool, and how you shape it is what's important. And I think what we've and that's if you go off and design very specific algorithms and that are only specific to yourself, etc., that's gonna become obsolete very quickly. So what's unique is actually understanding the space really well and having the right data generated in the right way to educate the tool you're going to use in terms of choices. So yes, so to answer your question, absolutely. I think integrating some of our data with some of the ways we develop our peptides with all these different techniques developed by Google, etc. Yes, and we're doing that already. So, but I think what's unique, it's not the design of these algorithms and new ways of looking at data, but it's literally generating the right data and asking the right questions to kind of design around those the right solution.
Let's talk about how you then work with some of your partners to scale, because you are, from what I understand, you're discovering really great building blocks. You're partnering with some big companies who can bring it to market. How are you scaling your building blocks? And then are the CPG companies manufacturing that?
So if you think about it, in simple terms, we provide a powder or a technology. So it depends on if the customer wants to develop an ingredient themselves to differentiate their area, let's say a new sweetener, a new salt replacer, a new antibiotic, a new flavor. Like we peptides can literally do all this plus health benefits. So we want to create something that reduces stress, etc. So those areas can be resolved with peptides. We develop some ourselves. So we have a large pipeline of development at different stages. Some of them are out of clinical on the market. Some of them are in clinical today to launch next year. Some of them are still in early development. So we have a very large pipeline because of the technology we have, covering every consumer, including things like salt replacements, sweet replacers, etc., that are healthier and better. And then a customer will come, we will sell the ingredient as it is, we'll use third-party manufacturing that's how we're scaling. We're using third-party manufacturing, and we'll ship the ingredient to them, and they'll put in their product, and they'll get a claim on the product, etc. Or they'll come with us a journey, an earlier pipeline, so earlier development. So peptides that are in earlier development, they'll come with us and say, well, actually, this area is really interesting for us. We see us launch a product with you. Let's come the journey in developing that fully with you. And it can be very early, like when we started working with Jivel on the sweetener area, or BSF in the inflammation, dandruff type itchiness area, or other. It can be really early, or it can be a little bit further down the line where it's nearly there in clinical, or it's in clinical, and they come the journey with us. So that's how we kind of work, Michael.
Your background, were you an academic? When you went to school, you said you were a computer scientist, and then eventually you navigated your way to food. How did you make that journey into wanting to build these building blocks to save or make a billion lives better? What was that journey like?
Yeah, so I'm a pure mathematician, Michael. I did computer science as well, and I always attracted to life sciences and biology. So I was always attracted, but at that time when I was in my academic career, it was separated. You couldn't really mix them that much. But I found a way in my PhD where it's called the area of bioinformatics, where it's kind of more that math kind of computer science mixed with biological questions. And during that period, I really kind of brought together two of my passions. And during that period, I was focused on looking at how molecules evolved over hundreds of millions of years and how they become what they became today. And really the goal of that was drug discovery. So discovering new drugs. Because a lot of the drugs that exist today come from molecules that are in nature and have been highly modified to address a certain need. So wanting to understand how they evolved, what they did, etc. So that was my PhD. And then I just literally came to the area of nutrition. It was a whole, I was at this conference where I was looking at and I have to say the story because it's super important, the kind of pivoting point in my career. There was a discussion on wallaby milk, and wallabies are really interesting. They're marsupials. They come out as fetuses, go into the pouch and develop in the pouch. And a wallaby female would have very often quite a few different wallaby babies at different ages, and each one is on a tit. So they'll drink the milk that's given to them. Okay, so they're each on different tits. So the professor showed two wallabies, and one seemed like massive and furry and huge, and the other one was tiny and skinny and couldn't barely move and no fur. And it's like, okay, let's guess the ages. And everyone's guessing, obviously, the furry one, the big one, was like much older, like 8 months, 7, whatever, 9 months. The other one was like 3 months, etc. But actually, the age was exactly the same. They were exactly the same age. That was the shocking part. Exactly the same age. The only difference was the milk they were given. So the earlier one was given the normal milk from birth. The one that seemed bigger was given a later milk. So the minute they came out of the pouch, the minute they came into the pouch, they were given a later milk. And what it meant, the observation.
When you say later,
later is stage milk. So a milk meant for an 8 month old wallaby or something later. I can't remember exactly the dates, but ultimately what was interesting was the conclusions were that wallaby milk varies so much in time that the molecules within it address very different needs. So at the start, when they looked at the wallabies, the one that was skinny with no fur had every internal organ developed. Their brain was well developed, their gut was well developed, their heart and so forth. All the external wasn't. So everything internally was well developed. So the molecules in milk that was given at the onset of the neonate coming in was all focused on internal development. The later milk was focused on external development only. So the internal development of the bigger wallaby were not. So the brain wasn't developed, the gut wasn't well developed, but externally the muscle, fur was all well developed. So the changes that occur in wallaby milk from start to end are incredible. And it's there's no other environmental factors that change the development of a wallaby. It's literally the milk that carries those molecules. When I saw that, and they've repeated that experiment multiple times, I just kind of
blew your mind.
Left that meeting. It blew my mind. I'm like, my God, if someone could fully understand the changes, and a lot of it obviously peptide driven, certain fats as well, changes clearly. If someone could understand what those changes are and understand, now you're talking about billions of different molecules. That's why AI is important. Understand what happens, understand you could literally alter and improve any system. And that was the turning point. I came out of that saying, I want to work in nutrition. and it was the right decision.
You had this education track that fused two things, mathematics and the world of biology. I think at the time it's called bioinformatics. When we talked to you guys, and the term being floated around 5 years ago, is this idea of computational biology, and it really is, nature is a computer in a sense, right? That's such a fascinating anecdote.
It's incredible.
Is this in in one of your classes, or you just went to a conference one day, or?
I was at I got approached when I finished my PhD. I got approached during my postdoc by a group that was that wanted to. It was a very large consortium that was an industry consortium that was coming together to add value to dairy. Because, dairy, sometimes it's cheaper to buy milk than to buy water, which is crazy. It doesn't make any sense. So they wanted to find ways of adding value by finding molecules in milk that could improve human health. So they approached me to head the computational part of it. And initially my answer to them was no, because I didn't know anything in that area and I didn't find it that interesting. So they came back and they sent me to this conference. It was in Napa Valley.
Pretty good move.
About milk. Yeah. And I went and I was like, oh my God, there's so much actually we don't know. But if we develop the right technologies and ask the right questions and data mine nature better, we will find solutions to everything. It's just a matter of time. And I came back and I took that role. And that was the biggest learning in terms of successes and failures of what the industry is looking for versus what academia is looking for.
Do you ever keep in touch with the person who made that decision says, Nora needs to go to this conference? Do you ever circle back with them and say, look at how it's changed my career?
Yeah. I do.
Did you ever see yourself at the time, when you're an academic, you're going for your PhD, I don't know if at that time you're thinking of being a CEO of a company, and all that brings with it, a startup that essentially you're going to be raising. You just raised your Series C. That's a different skill set. It's also a lot of work to raise money. And because I've seen founders go out there, scientists like you, and it wears on them because they want to be doing science. Did you see yourself being a CEO of a startup like this?
No, I think, Michael, the way I think a lot of successful founders have, and the reason why is that they've been successful, I think, is that, and not all are, is that you need to be super adaptable and super flexible. And you need to have an ear constantly listening to the industry, on the ground, listening to what the trends are saying, to where things are going. So you have to be that adaptable. You have to understand what the customer needs and where you want to go, because ultimately our goal is to improve the lives of billions of people. And I knew that the skill sets I had, and actually, to be honest, anyone starting at my shoes, whether they were super industry driven or whatever their background, would have had to also learn quite a bit along the journey and adapt to what the company needs in order to fulfill that mission and vision. So ultimately, I think the most successful ones are the ones that understand their limitations, what they're good at, what they're not so good at. Hire people around you that are good at what you're not so good at, but also be very flexible and adaptable and understand that there's times that you may not know. But having an ear to the trends will actually give you those answers as well. So it's not easy. There are many, I had no skill set at the time in fundraising, but I've become really good at it. And we've never And it's because I communicate the vision very clearly. There's clear growth metrics, this clarity in terms of customers joining. So ultimately, it's a very mathematical way of thinking. Actually, fundraising is a very mathematical way of thinking in terms of, okay, here are the criteria that you need to hit in order for investment to come in. And then obviously there are things that I do that I'm not so good at, and I usually give those away to others as well. So you have to be constantly adaptable. Did I think about it at the beginning? No. What I did think is we are going to succeed in improving the lives of billions of people and being in every product that we consume. That I know. We're on the journey to get there, and however it's shaped, and whatever I need to learn or someone else needs to learn, we're just going to learn it.
Thinking at all times like a computer scientist, a mathematician, the algorithm for developing a company as a CEO, it sounds like you cracked it. You find customers.
There's still a lot to learn, but I think,
But you talk about like, it's mathematical. You have customers, prove revenue.
Michael, everything is literally, if you take back, it's like a lot of it is, and the people giving or heading those funds are usually very analytical and
you speak their language.
You just speak the language of whoever you're talking to. I think so. Adaptability is really important, and speaking the language of your customer or your audience, whoever that is very key. And if you don't, you lose. So it's very important. Yeah.
Well, Nora, I always enjoy talking to folks like you who are trailblazing on the very edge of the world and trying to like help the lives of 1 billion people. So look forward to keeping up and hearing more about Nuritas in the future. So thank you for spending time with me today.
Thanks, Michael. Thank you.
Well, that's my conversation with Dr. Nora Khaldi, who's using AI to crack the code on finding new ingredients in nature. Like I said, we'll have another podcast in just a few days, but you can always go to Spoon, check out all the podcasts we have to offer. Just go to spoon.tech, click podcasts. You'll find lots of great podcasts from the likes of Mike Lee, Eric Schulze, Adam Yee, Karen O'Neill, and many more. All right, folks, that's it for now. We'll talk to you next week.
If you enjoyed this episode, why not share it with a friend? And don't forget to give us a 5-star review. You'll find more content like this on the spoon.tech/podcasts.